Peace, peace, Anti-Conquista family. Thanks for your patience. We're here with Jeremy Dupin, Haitian filmmaker, Haitian activist, who worked for many years with Al Jazeera and with Telesur. He's been a part of the Haitian anti-imperialist movement for several decades. We're still struggling with the connection to some of the Haitian comrades. So we appreciate everybody's patience. Very important right now to A, understand what's happening in Haiti, and B, first and foremost, how can we show solidarity? So, Jeremy, bring us into the streets of Port-au-Prince, au Cap Haitien, Jeremy. What's happening over there? What can you update us on?
Well, thank you, Danny, for the opportunity. Um, well, we are having a situation like a very difficult situation right now, and on the ground of Haiti. Um, where the according to the Haitian Constitution, the Constitution mandate of the current president, Jovenel Moise, is over since February 7th, 2021. And this is the result of a fraudulent election that was organized in 2015 by the Martelly, former President Martelly administration, and we had now this election got to were called fraudulent by everybody, and they had to reorganize another election. And also we were in a situation to have a second election, and in this second election where President Jovenel was elected. I mean, with all the suspicion, with all the cries of fraud, but it was acceptable. And since 2017, President Jovenel was in power. But according to the the Constitution, it clearly said whoever run this election, the mandate was gonna end in 2021, because there was because for the time that was lost in doing the whole process, because it was like a 2 years process, because it was two elections. So President Jovenel want to bypass that, and despite like almost every single sectors in Haiti is calling for him to leave. The judiciary uh, um, power now is paralyzed, and the judiciary power call him to leave. Catholic Church, Protestant Church, civil society, like every single sectors you can name is calling the president to leave because his mandate is over. But
Jeremy,
unfor-
let me see if I can bring in Patrick. Patrick, où qu'attendez-nous là? Patrick. Well, there goes Patrick. And we lost Jean Baptiste in Port-au-Prince. So yeah, Jeremy, keep going. And how? Well, here comes Jean Paul. Let's see if we can get Jean Paul. Jean Paul, où qu'attendez-nous là? Bonsoir, Jean Paul. All right, so Anti-Conquista family, from the jump, thank you. It's very difficult to connect to the Haitian comrades in Haiti, but we're doing our best. So me and Jeremy will keep chopping it up as the other comrades try to come in. Let's see if we got Jean Paul. Katandenu là. I see Jean-Paul's there, but
Yeah.
they asked us if we should pre-record this, which is one idea, but we also have to figure out translation with some of the. There's Jean-Paul. Bonsoir, Jean-Paul. Alternative socialiste, Katandenu. So, Jeremy, how violent have these past few days been? How many deaths, how many injured?
It's unbelievable how violent it is on the ground right now. Um, I mean, really, especially the ground of Port-au-Prince right now, it's like a war zone between protesters and and police, riot police. Um, and I mean, one thing that to mention is in the night of between the 6th to the 7th of February, it's how a few judges of the highest court highest court in the country was persecuted by the government, where the government uh, is talking about a plot of a coup d'état, where they arrest one of the judge that was supposed to be I mean, that could have been actually President Jovenel predecessor, because according to this um, uh, to the agreement among the opposition powers, they were gonna choose one of the I mean the oldest judge and the highest court to become the interim president. So that judge was a target among over like over 23 person was arrested because of this so-called plot of a coup d'état. And ironically, in that very same day, the Haitian president take a trip to the southeast of the country to go to Carnival. So, in any country where there's a plot against the government or against the president, where the life of the president is in danger, so you would definitely have this president secure in a secure location until the security forces um, have the situation under control.
Let's see
But
if we got Patrick and Jean-Paul. Jean-Paul, oula. Jean-Paul, Katandenu là. Patrick, bonsoir, Patrick. Yeah,
Jean-Paul a essayé de connecter.
Jean-Paul, oula.
no, we can't see them. Look out, where's Jean Paul?
Yeah. Comment nous y est, Jean-Paul? Ou ka di nou sak pase là na Port-au-Prince avec rébellion populaire? Nous bien, oui. En forme.
Allô?
Yeah, nous ka attendez ou me parler?
Allô?
Yeah. Patrick. Ou me parler? So, Patrick, Patrick, ou met sou vle ou ka koupe video, wap jist pale avek voa ou.
Okay.
Ya, se sa, nou ka tende ou kounya. All right, comrades, we gonna get the truth out by any means necessary.
Son pa tro bon kote mwen. Gen
Yeah,
yon
nou ka
koupe
tende.
konya men.
So this is, I think, very symbolic of the struggle, Jeremy, and everyone who's listening to us. Shout out to Mamira and Thomas and Jenny, John, Mateo, Ziryab, great points about Senator Moise Jean Charles. I think this is a microcosm of the everyday struggle, things that we take for granted here in the belly of the beast. And if we were working with some fancy NGO and some of that United Nations money, you know, we would have every last translator, we would have all the infrastructure and equipment. But because we're trying to speak from Bas Pepla, because we're trying to speak, you know, with the masses, shoulder to shoulder, Zepal sous Zepal, you see the technical problems we have, and we just lost both comrades. Yeah, Jeremy, I can speak for a minute. I don't know if you want to text them. If you can hit them up on WhatsApp and just tell them to try to come on with no video and just do I don't know if there's a way they can just come on with the volume. Well, here's Jean Paul again, but I don't even know how to tell them to come on here with no video. Yeah, so a lot of people expressing love and solidarity with Haiti, and of course, these are the sons here and the daughters. Hopefully, we're gonna inspire Mamira. Mamira, I know you got connections, so say kunyaki nu bezueo, Mamira. We have other comrades who might be able to join us too. But these are the sons and daughters of Dessalines, of Toussaint, Louverture, of Charmaille Peralt, of Aristide, of so many noble warriors. So we're gonna get their voices out by any means necessary. Jean Paul, ou ka tande nou la? Ok, Patrick, ou me pale? Patrick. So, Jeremy, back to you. Thanks for your patience. How fierce is the repression right now in Haiti? What is it like for the journalists trying to tell the truth? You have a long career as an alternative, independent journalist. What's the reality on the ground right now?
The no, I mean, no one you know, is is safe really, you know, with this situation right now. Only yesterday, one reporter got shot on the Champ Moss, and and he didn't make it after they run with him in the hospital. So I was in touch with a few friends where they were trying to find some blood for him for some infusion. But unfortunately, he lost too much blood during the day because it was a very cruel footage to see him on the ground for hours before he could have, yeah, he had a chance to go to the hospital, but unfortunately he didn't make it. Um, and there was another journalist again yesterday that got shot, but one of them so didn't make it, as I said. And after that, so the footage, the the very graphic images of police brutality right now that's coming out of Haiti, it's unbelievable. Um, and and but the most important thing is it's because the still after all that, the you have uh, um group, armed gang that's all over this country, and and uh, and they have the best support, the best protection of this government, and it is clear uh, of their support, um, and their and how much they are protected, because still now, we they, despite of all reports of human rights abuses, uh, both from human rights organization on the ground of Haiti, and the UN, uh, and the State Department, but there's still nothing haven't hasn't been done yet to to put these people where they belong. So it's a very security wise, this is very unpredictable.
And
There's a blue fear right now on the ground.
I was telling my students, Jeremy, that it's really the U.S. State Department, and it's the NGOs, and it's the IMF, and we heard the State Department statements that they wanted to give Jovenel Moïse a year, and who is the State Department? Who is Joe Biden? Who is the Pentagon? Who is the IMF to decide about the Haitian people's lives? So people here don't realize this neo-colonial legacy that weighs on everyday life in Haiti.
Oh no, this is this is business as usual. I mean, uh, this you know the first election where President Jovenel Moise was elected was very fraudulent, and the U.S. still support fully this government, despite of all the um, uh, corruption allegations, especially over the Petro Caribbean Fund, where over $5 billion was vanished, and all the massacre that happened, and several Haiti's neighborhoods, especially the biggest one, the most cruel and most violent, and La Saline, um, and the government now is the president President Jovenel is leading by decree, where he didn't realize any election that were when he was supposed to realize election to renew 1/3 of the Senate. All the local governments are their mandate was over since last year, and he didn't realize any election for that. And now the judiciary power, uh, now everybody's in fear, because he just took a decree where he gives retirement to every single people that could have been replaced him as an interim president, just yesterday. So it's a situation where we really don't know where it is going right now. But the only thing is this hypocrisy of the U.S. and Canada right now, France, the EU, OAS. It's a vast plot against the Haitian people right now, because the Haitian people, the every single sectors, the churches, the civil society, everybody expressing one will, but only the international community uh, uh, is keep supporting President Joseph Moise.
And a lot of people here in the U.S. don't realize this big stick policy of the U.S. towards Haiti extends all the way back to 1915 to 1925, occupation of Haiti, the heroic resistance of Kako Yo, of Charmai Peralt. It was just the anniversary a few years ago of the end of that occupation, and here we go again. And then when you have Jean Bertrand Aristide, who Si l'Eglisio, the Church of the People, liberation theology, and every time there's un petit l'espoir, a hope for Haiti, what does imperialism do? I think we got Patrick. Persistence. Patrick, mkawe ou bien?
Hola, hola, ¿cómo están ustedes? No sé si puedo
Comment nous, Patrick?
Bonsoir, Patrick. Ou met parler, parce que nap tanou. Pep yo vle tande ou.
¿No te bien?
Yeah, ¿cómo
Alors,
analizas? Yeah. ¿Cómo tú ves la situación en tu patria, Patrick?
Connexion vraiment pas bon.
yo,
Patrick. Oh man, this is what happened last night with the Ecuadorian comrade, and we appreciate everyone hanging in there. We're gonna sort it out. These are tried and true comrades. They're comrades who've had to go into exile before over the years. They've been on the ground fighting for their people and fighting in the diaspora. So we want to keep expressing solidarity, solidarity of the Haitian people. So many of us here, Jeremy on the left, we feel an incredible historic responsibility and duty to the Haitian people. You all truly stand on the shoulders of giants. You've been resisting for centuries. You've overcome empires, and it's really only here in the belly of the beast and over there in Haiti, in one of the most exploited countries and one of the most countries that's fought back the hardest. We know that there's a connection between your resistance. So, where do you think this is headed, Jeremy? Do you think things are going to be winding down? Are things going to get more intense?
I think things gonna be more intense. I really think things gonna be more intense because you know there's the resentment right now on the ground of this administration is real and is getting more and more tense, and then the other side, it's clearly that President Jovenel doesn't want to is not backing off. So it's really unpredictable what's going to happen. I'm very worried that more and more people will die. But we know the international community doesn't really show that they care about what's going on the ground, because it's poor people dying. It's so they nobody really care, and we have a kidnapping phenomenon on the rise. A lot of people is being kidnapped for high ransom, and little middle class people. Now it's completely decapitalized, and because President Jovenel was not able to keep political stability, so for business could have uh, um, 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 uh, and like for more investment could have come. Au contraire, it was like the very few businesses we had as closed their door because the situation on the ground was not favorable for businesses. So we have a situation right now. Um, the It's very unpredictable what's gonna happen, but it's clear that that violence that we are seeing in the street of Port-au-Prince will rise. More It's gonna be more police brutality because the resistance right now is very it is getting more and more stronger. So I can only imagine now what is the new plan, new security plan of this government right now. um
We have some good questions here. Uh, it's good to see Professor Tony. It's good to see the philosophy of liberation. Infinita Salo, John Rivera, Liberté o l'amour. Thank you for that comment. Joseph, the Haiti Reformation Project. They try to silence leftist voices, revolutionary voices from Haiti, but that hope that the anti-imperialists in Haiti have always projected for centuries shines through. We're still going to try to get our other guests in here. Thanks everybody for their patience. The left in Haiti. Let's talk about the left in Haiti, Jeremy. There's some good questions here about the revolutionary movements there. I mean, people have to understand a few different things. First of all, imperialism with their soft coups. They've tried to NGOize, the NGOization of dissent in Haiti. So they've tried to bribe and buy off different sectors of the left. With all them earthquake funds, you can rest assured not 1 cent of all of Wyclef's money and all of U.S. Aid's money and everything else we texted to those corny little charity hotlines, none of that ever got to Bas Social Pepla. It never got into Solino. It never got to Cité Soleil. There were so many bureaucrats and middlemen stealing that money. Who's best equipped to do the grassroots work? It's the revolutionaries. It's the socialists. It's the grassroots leaders. And that's why all these Clinton supervised funding streams are such a sham. So with the right hand, the Pentagon, the State Department, U.S. intelligence crushes dissent, and then with the left hand, with the liberal hand, they shower down all these funding streams, which really directly and indirectly take away from the Haitian grassroots movement. So we want to expose all of that. Jeremy, talk to us about the left in Haiti, these rebellions we're seeing. To what extent is it spontaneous? To what extent is it organized? Is it going to be a protracted war? What's your vision?
well, I mean, my vision, I mean, let me go back to 20 to 2018, I would say, when the when this huge movement started for accountability, for the Petro Caribe Fund, and that was one picture taken by one young activist, one young photographer, filmmaker, and that gone viral, and the whole country, the whole youth, uh, uh, um, were very quickly sympathized and was asking, like, for 2 years, occupy the ground to ask for accountability, to ask for where does money go, because it's over $4 billion, and it is not a grant from the Venezuelan government. It is a debt. It's a money that, sooner or later, the Haitians will have to pay back. So, um, that but the, that was a sign to show how much, um, people, like regular people that was never been part of an organization before, very regular people, that's suffering, that's struggling every day, um, understood the necessity to to take the street and to ask for government accountability. Um, so there's a lot of maneuvers until today to silence that movement, and today there's another step where the mandate of the current president is over, but he doesn't want to leave office, and I think it's only started. This is only getting started now, because the resentment is gonna grow, because the current situation of the people of the ground. People are struggling to eat. People are struggling to send their kids to school. People are struggling to do anything, and with unemployment that's over 70%. So it's a this country is crumbling. So I can only, I mean, from what I can see, this is not what I hope, but I can only feel that this is gonna be a very long fight, and I already feel bad for all the victims from police brutality that I'm saying that I already see in the street, and unfortunately, there's not a voice that this government will listen to, other than the voice of the blanc. So, and they are the one that's actually supporting him 100%, despite of all all the corruption, all the police brutality, of leading a country by decree, and trying to silence every single other power in this country.
And there's a great question here by Professor O'Brien. Is Minister still a player? Are there still UN boots on the ground? And what the UN and the US have done, I mean, first of all, we have to expose the sheer hypocrisy of the United Nations. I mean, where's the United Nations in here in the United States, in Ferguson, Missouri? Where's the United Nations in Camden, New Jersey, in Kenosha, and across this country? We could use the United Nations. Let's remember that Paul Robeson and Malcolm X brought the United States to the UN for human rights crimes against the Black community and against many oppressed communities here. So the absolute hypocrisy of the United Nations, always invading and occupying a country like Haiti, but then doing an about face when it comes to interfering in the internal issues of a U.S. or in England or whatever oppressor country. So the UN played a sinister, dastardly role in Haiti. Shame on Brazil. When I used to live in Haiti, there were a lot of Brazilian troops and Nepalese troops coming from other oppressed countries who owe so much to Haiti. So what minister is no longer there officially. What the United Nations and the U.S. has done is they've trained the Haitian soldiers and the Haitian police, because of course we know that imperialism prefers indirect control. Because with direct control, you can point at the occupying soldiers. You can say, "Gardez blanc ça yo qui occupe pays." Look at the boots on the ground that are occupying the homeland of Dessalines, of Toussaint. So that's the role right now of the U.S. military. Many Haitian police have been trained in Miami. So we have to understand that, as Jeremy said, Jovenel Moise, without the Pentagon, without U.S. backing, without the quote-unquote international community, which is nothing but a euphemism for an international cabal of intruders and interventionists in Haiti, Jovenel Moise would fall tomorrow. And this rebellion would be successful. So that's the first thing that we have to understand, that the Haitian people aren't just going up against a dictator. Jovenel Moise is a symptom, just like Trump, just like Biden, just like Bush, Obama. Jovenel Moise is a symptom of a much larger disease, and that disease is international white supremacy and imperialism. So yeah, just like Black Patriot Truth Serum is saying here, the UN is a plaything in the hands of the United States. And I think a lot of us, not the crowd here, because most people already have anti-imperialist training, but if you talk to eighth graders in this country, my son's in the back room doing his eighth grade homework, if he's not playing video games, trying to sneak his video games on while we're busy here. But if you talk to an eighth grade or a high school students in this country, they think that the UN is going around the world helping against the pandemic and handing out food. They don't have a true sense, Jeremy, of the role that the UN plays. So, do you want to share with us the role of Haitian armed forces today? Who trained them? Where's the money come from? These neo-Duvalierist Tonton Makuts?
Well, the minister force was was replaced by like a more civilian like mission, as you say, to train and to support the rule of law, quote unquote. But the rule of law, like he's like today you have an administration that under their radar several massacres happened since 2018 to now, and even the UN made their own investigation and their own report acknowledging how many people that dies and massacre, and they still support that very same government. So this is one example of how like how much that hypocrisy is, and this is certainly I could take more example of the like the training that they are giving, the support that they say that they are giving. It is not for the regular Haitian. The regular Haitian is struggling of unemployment. This is what this country is struggling for. It's for unemployment. It's for the and that very same United Nations um, acknowledge their responsibility and and contaminating and killed tens of thousands of Haitians with cholera, where they were supposed they 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 acknowledge it, and they talk about a plan to help this country to rebuild an infrastructure for sanitation, for and potable water. Still now, nothing hasn't been done. So it is not. Just to talk about what training or what they are doing right now. It is this country is just you know the it is the same. It is this the sugarcane plantation that was existed during the slavery now is just convert to something nicer, but it is the same colonialism system going on. We I don't think I don't think we can expect much of the international community. I don't think they're gonna do much. I think this the country has to mobilize for what they believe, for what they want, and 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 uh, and to force this administration to respect the will of the people.
Yeah, and even before this rebellion, just everyday life is already so difficult. You know, you mentioned the Grand Goût, the hunger people are up against in Haiti, which has historically been such a rich country, the crown jewel of the French Empire. CLR James, if people want a deeper historical understanding of Haiti, CLR James's Black Jacobins is an incredible, incredible book, and it looks at the leadership of Toussaint Louverture and Jean-Jacques Dessalines, who had different visions in terms of strategy, but both wanted what Haiti represents, and that's independence, liberté, true, genuine economic and political self-determination. But even before this rebellion, the Haitian good, the Haitian currency, it's already 75 Haitian goods just for $1. So from the perspective of the 10 and a half, 11 million people of Haiti, never mind the diaspora, I mean, why are you going to stay? Why are you going to stay in your homeland if you can get whatever job in Miami and Brooklyn and in Boston? I mean, even a job at Subway or what have you. You're going to make 3 to 5 to 8 times as much as in your homeland. So even before this rebellion, the entire system is rigged against oppressed people. And this whole devaluation of Haiti's currency is no different than the devaluation of Cuba's currency, of Mexico's currency. Right now in Venezuela, for $1, it's 1.7 million bolivares. So that's another way through currency control and manipulation that they can manipulate and exploit and force our people into migration. So Black Patriot here says these leaders have been groomed by the US and their NGOs since they were kids. That is what's going on a lot in these orphanages in Haiti and around the world. They've been brainwashed. Thank you, Amy. Solidarity from Mexico. Black Patriot calls out the UN. And we're going to keep trying to get more international speakers, despite the technical difficulties. It's so important to bring these revolutionaries to you all. And for me, you know, Jeremy, when I le muete vive na Port-au-Prince, le muete Delma, Solino, all the time I spent in Haiti, you know, I'm a student of the Haitians and I'm a student of the Haitian spirit of resistance. And we see Haiti alive right now. There is fear, but the diametrical opposite of fear, there's a ton of hope. And Haiti always gives us hope, you know. Haiti's like that panther backed into a corner. They can't go left, they can't go right, so they charge forward. And that's been the historical nature of Haiti. So, Jeremy, anything else you want to share from
Well,
on
I
the
mean, at this point, what I want to share really is how important right now is solidarity. Is to is important to the Haitian people right now, to the movement on the ground right now. It is important for whoever is interesting about the situation in Haiti, really carefully informed, from the ground, from what's really happening, and the solidarity to take that message to, where actually the Haitian people cannot get. So their cause can be, can be heard to, to the to the last, person on earth, because this what's happening in Haiti needs to be heard, needs to be known, and needs to be understood. And we know the mainstream media is not gonna do it. In fact, they're all controlled, by superpower, by rich, very rich businesses. So I hope that um, more people can be informed about this situation, and bring their solidarity in the way they can, to what's going on right now. There are a lot of grassroots movement that needs support, to better organize. I think whoever can help, whoever can can write an article, can make for fundraising. Whoever can whatever that somebody right now can do to support, especially grassroots movements in Haiti. This is very important.
Yeah, a lot of good comments here about Bill Clinton and the Clinton Foundation's role in Haiti, dumping surplus U.S. agricultural produce, destroying the Haitian rice market. Of course, there was the cochon creole. Everyone should look up the Creole pigs. Some of y'all probably too young to remember this, but in the 1980s, USAID, the opposite of aid, went into Haiti and they killed off the local cochon creole, the local Haiti pig population. It was horrible. It affected so many paysannos of the Haitian peasantry. Jose says the NGOs, evangelical entities, the philanthropists, the Creole is bad, French crowd. Oh yeah, there's no lack of them. Jose got experience in Haiti. The party on Sobe Live in Pembroke Pines clique represent a self-serving class of anti-patriot Haitiano. Yeah, sounds like Jose spent time in Haiti. Yeah, you see all these foreigners with 6-digit salaries, and you're like, wait a minute, Haiti's poor? And Haiti's never been poor. Nous comprenons ça, Jeremy. Haiti's never been poor, but Haiti's been exploited, and Haiti's been oppressed. And you know what killed me this morning, Jeremy? One side, Jeremy, Haiti's never been poor, but Haiti's been exploited, and Haiti's been oppressed. And you know what killed me this morning, Jeremy? Amira, you have to shut off the podcast. So I'll make this last point, and I'll introduce our next guest. But the Dominican Republic, the Dominican government, not the Dominican people. The Dominican government, what did they do yesterday, Jeremy? They didn't send solidarity or express any type of sympathy or empathy. They sent more Dominican soldiers to their border to make sure Haitians couldn't cross through. So these sensationalist headlines in the Dominican Republic, in the U.S., and here we have Dr. Mamira Prosper, no one better to debunk all of the sensationalism. Dr. Prosper, thank you so much for joining us. Your work is so important on exposing the truth about Haiti. Before we bring in Mamira, Jeremy, how are you on time? Si besoin aller, pas un problème.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah, I'm gonna have to go, but I can spare another 5 minutes.
Oh, another 5 minutes. All right. Well, Mamira, this is Jeremy, and so Mamira. Yeah, nous content. Well, Mamira. So Mamira, what are your impressions? This rebellion is in full force. Speak to the people, make it plain, like Malcolm said.
Sure. So I'm on child care duty. I'm gonna be quick before my child appears on my screen. But I mean, I think Jeremy laid it out very well for us already, right? In terms of like what's going on the ground. I think I was in Haiti about less than a month ago, and the general feeling is one of terror. That folks are extremely afraid of the repression, right? That's been ongoing since the protests have started intensifying in 2018, right? That moment when we started seeing Haiti in the news again, which doesn't talk about, right, the endless years of protest since the PHTK regime has been in power. And so the general feeling is one of terror. And I think, most people, if, on the left have been paying attention. There were general strikes called earlier last week. But what's happening on the ground right now is really, right, the pushback from PHTK to remain in power, as Jeremy has said. And the feeling that I'm getting from folks on the ground is one of fear and distress, right? That people in general and, the tactics of the state to essentially control the space and prevent, right, rebellion from happening is, catching on a bit. Folks are feeling skittish, right? They're not really sure about what's happening because there's so many moving parts right now. Technically, Haiti has two presidents, right? One that's of this, essentially following the chain of command according to the Constitution, that it would be a Supreme Court judge. But just, the next day after that president was, essentially named or pushed by the opposition generally. And, we see a lot of folks on the ground. I'm getting WhatsApp messages from folks who are supporting, right, this parallel government, because it's anything to get PHTK out, right? I think, I think Jeremy, pointed this out, right? The opposition is not without flaws and not necessarily clear on how to, usher us out of this extractivist, development model of that's been prescribed to Haiti, and that Haitian elites, including those in the state, right, have accepted to reproduce. So it's not clear that the opposition has really a plan to do otherwise. However, right, the general feeling of grassroots movements is anything else but what's there now, right? And then we'll just deal with the opposition, and the folks that we know already are shady later. And I think that's a general feeling on the ground that I'm getting from folks and that I felt when I was there, right? And I've been saying this a lot, right? Not to reduce the struggle between the opposition that vies for its own, right, personal accumulation of power with the people's will, right? To get the PHTK out and to really address, right, some of the material conditions that Haitians are facing, including, right, the so-called middle class that does not even sure, right, like how they're going to survive the next couple of weeks and months, right? Which is what we've seen since 2008, a contingent of the middle class coming out and joining the people's struggle, because, right, everybody's material conditions are being threatened in that space, right?
I think for a lot of the people listening too, when they talk about the left, they picture the United States where we can, for the most part, organize freely. In Haiti, like the generation.
Can we organize freely in the United States?
In comparison, relatively. I don't have any illusions about the bourgeois democracy, this fake democracy here. But the generation I was a part of in Haiti, in the Dominican Republic, I saw an entire generation persecuted, tortured, kidnapped, political prisoners, killed. So it's a lot more difficult for the left to have a sustained resistance. So there's a lot of spontaneity right now. There's a lot of questions. These are people going into the streets because they've had enough. There's this spontaneous effect. And of course, the Haitian organizers are trying to figure out on the ground how to seize this momentum, how to seize the time. Mamira, can you talk about some of your research, the work that you do exposing the quote-unquote left hand of U.S. imperialism, the NGOization of dissent? Where's all this money coming from? What are the Clintons really? The Clintons claim to be the saviors of Haiti, but what's the truth on the ground there?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I think the truth about NGOs in Haiti has been, largely exposed in the last 10 years, at least to the folks who want to listen, right, and want to hear, because unfortunately the nonprofit industrial complex is well and alive in Haiti. But yeah, I mean, there's a special issue coming out. I got to plug it in on NACLA on Haiti, and there's a piece that covers the relationship between NGOs and the gangsterization of Haiti, right? And how the NGOs in some ways have provided, have empowered in some ways certain gangs, right? By having to come into spaces and do work, right, of development, quote unquote, and having to deal with the gangs, right, and offer them sometimes money, often via nonprofit organizations that people have quickly put up because their funds becoming available, right? So the NGOs definitely have a relationship with the gangsterization of the space in Haiti, but certainly of right, being complicit in dictatorship. Right? It doesn't matter what kind of organ, an NGO is, specifically the international ones that are in Haiti, they continue to do, right, the advocacy work that they do with Jovenel, as Jeremy pointed out earlier, who's ruling by decree, right? It makes no sense to say we want to protect children. We're going to sit with a dictator to pass a decree to protect children, right? And we've seen like countless organizations continue to sit at the table with Jovenel on his own to attempt to pass supposedly, laws that would protect certain human rights, right? So there's a contradiction here that, in terms of the NGOs being, wanting to push their somewhat liberal agenda, sometimes they construct themselves as progressive, right? But very much opening the door to a continual imperialist relationship between, right, the Haitian state and all of the different, actors that we've mentioned already, the IMF, the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank. These are all the folks who get, a special seat at the table with the state and get to propose and dictate, right, development plans. And this is true across, right, the Caribbean and much of the global South, right, that these actors are always present. And here comes my kid.
Jeremy.
Oh my God. It's almost time for me. It's actually
Don't worry, Jeremy. We'll keep holding it down.
All right.
Nous comptons well, and we're going to keep holding it down with the resistance.
Right. Now, it was my pleasure. It was my pleasure, Danny, and keep the good work. Keep the good work, and Mamira, j'étais vraiment content et faire connaissance.
Faire connaissance tout, faut nous connecter pour nous parler toujours.
Exactement. N'a pas connecté. All right.
So thank you, Jeremy. Kembela for him.
Yeah,
Mamira's got another speaker to replace.
Exactly right.
Jeremy's gone. Mamira's bringing in that T. Desaline.
Yeah.
young revolutionary coming through.
All right.
Yeah, great comment there, Lumpia Logic. We need to have the super chats. Our philosophy at Anti-Conquista, nothing for us, everything for everybody, that Zapatista slogan. But fundraising is important. Mamira and I were speaking that that's what the Haitian people are up against. The Haitian people are up against an empire, not just the Pentagon and U.S. intelligence who's surveilling every zig and zag and backward and forward movement, the inner dynamics of the ongoing Haitian, unfinished Haitian revolution. But the Haitian people are also battling against this $100 billion nonprofit industrial complex. And what they do is there's a massive brain drain externally. We talked about the devaluation of the good of the Haitian currency. And then what do they do with resistance? Well, if you're trying to feed your family, you walk by Say Grand Goût, and here comes some NGO that can give you a $40,000 salary. With $40,000 in Haiti, what minute? You chilling. So that's how they get you. So I think here's another big question. Can there be a successful revolution in Haiti without a revolution here? What's our role here? Jorge Farinacci, one of the independence leaders in Puerto Rico, he visited New York a few years back, and he said the greatest way you can show solidarity with Puerto Rico in all colonized countries is by organizing in the belly of the beast, by organizing a revolution right here in Brooklyn, Bronx, Carolina, California. So, Mamira, we were speaking earlier too about the sensationalism. All of the sensationalism, I think you called it Black Death pornography. Do you want to speak on the sensationalism that has, for a long time, characterized Western miscoverage of Haiti? Oh, take your time. I'll fill in.
Yes. Yeah, and I think I was sharing with you about, my hesitation in terms of circulating images coming out of Haiti that really, exposed the dictatorship and its effects, of violence, including violence against young children. So I think, we were sharing today with you, Danny, that earlier this year there were several walkouts by elementary school children against kidnapping. There had been a young boy just kidnapped. And the reaction of the state was to, do more of the same, which is to throw tear gas at children. And, there was an image of a young girl, on the ground, bleeding out of, parts of her, circulating on WhatsApp, on Haitian WhatsApp. And, I didn't necessarily forward it around, right? Because I'm also sensitive to how Black bodies in general and Black death is just something that is too much that is used for entertainment, right? Rather than for real calls for solidarity, right? And so I think, I just want to piggyback on that it's important for us to figure out how to get funds, to Haitians on the ground doing the work. I'm having reports from folks who at some point did have relationships with a variety of, funders, saying that the funders are no longer on the ground supporting the work because people, right, have become a little bit more radical, including, right, some human rights organizations that have attempted to remain somewhat apolitical that now have to really position themselves on the current regime, So there's definitely the making sure that we send the money directly to the folks on the ground. But I think there's a growing sense by the Haitians on the ground that the struggle needs to be internationalized. So not just simply at the level of advocacy, in Congress, right to your, representative, but also a show of, corporeal solidarity, right? Like showing up in Haiti to, serve as observers, right? And to potentially be in the marches and also protest at the U.S. Embassy, right? Like maybe we, it's clear that we as, U.S. American or people who hold U.S. passports don't have, can't have a say directly in Haitian politics, but we can certainly show up and speak to Ambassador Cizon, right? Who's ironically a woman of color who is the ambassador, U.S. ambassador in Haiti, and who promotes, right, all of the imperialist ways of the U.S. in the country. So I think, we are coming to that point in the struggle where Haitians are going to ask for folks, to figure out, their COVID protocols and like get on those planes and show up on the ground, I think that we are reaching that point. Folks are feeling extremely scared, extremely terrorized. They are showing up in the streets, but the gangs are really also extremely empowered to control the space, right, and to prevent folks from coming out. I think that's something that we're not hearing enough about. Is that after this general strike, obviously, right, the reaction has been for gangs to take over the streets, right, and to push people back into their homes.
Thank you for multitasking, and we'll fill in the blanks, so it's all good. You on mom duty. That's thank you for taking out this time for Haiti. And it was crazy last week. A plane was arriving in Canada, and the Canadian authorities accused, because there were dozens and dozens of Haitians on the flight, they said that Haitians were bringing COVID into Canada. So there's all these incredible stereotypes when, in fact, the rates of COVID in Haiti have been far lower than in Canada, never mind the United States. So there's this constant stigmatization. We saw it in the 1980s. There was the infamous 4H list. There's the young T. Dessalines, cap compare avec nous là. Beautiful, beautiful. In the 1980s, you had the infamous Department of Health 4H list, where they accused hemophiliacs, heroin addicts, homosexuals, and Haitians of being responsible for the spread of AIDS. In the Haitian community, na Flatbush, yo te voye un pile wash sous police yo. And the Haitian community from Flatbush, they marched across, they shut down the Brooklyn Bridge. And I know some of the other professors and comrades who are listening, who are my age or a little bit older, they remember some of those marches. In 2000, the NYPD killed Patrick Dorismond. Patrick Dorismond, who was a bouncer doing his job, undercover NYPD cops tried to sell him drugs. He did his job. He told the cops to get lost. Everyone should look up Patrick Dorismond. NYPD ended up murdering him for doing his job. And we went out into the streets of East Flatbush and we shut down Nostrand and Church Ave, and dozens and dozens of NYPD officers were sent to the hospital that day. I'll never forget, the Haitian community was making it rain bricks and rocks from those tenement buildings in Brooklyn. So the Haitian community, not just in Haiti, but in the diaspora, has a long, long history of resistance. And we all feel that historical duty and debt to the Haitian people for everything they've shared with us and taught us. So yeah, Mamira, any forecasting? What do you see in the next few days? Do you think Jovenel Moïse is his power? Is he gonna cling to power? Is this déchoucage capable of overthrowing him? Is this gonna be a protracted struggle? What are your predictions for the next few days and weeks?
Well, I just wanted to jump on the comment that you made about, Haitian militants here on this side, or in this corner of the empire, right? That currently Haitian activists in the United States, Haitian American activists, right, are organizing against, right, the deportation of thousands of Haitians back to Haiti. Just last week, right, in the middle of this crisis that the U.S., right, under Biden, which I think most folks thought was going to be, I guess more progressive on this issue, right, has returned Haitians home, and so it's in their benefit to present Haiti as right, or to align themselves with Jovenel and say that, right, they were organizing a coup against him, right, towards claiming that this is a properly democratic government, to justify also returning people to, right, what is a country that's, under terror, right, terror of the gangs, terror of that particular government. And so I just wanted to link these things, right, because many of these folks who are in detention centers at some point, they were saying 44% of people in detention centers were Haitian, and typically, right, the conversations around immigration in the U.S. don't think about Black people as being immigrants, right, or specifically in this case, Haitians. And these are folks who, many of them have ended up at the U.S.-Mexico border after walking from Brazil, right, and traversing 11 countries just to get to the border, be detained, and return to Haiti. And we see that in 2020, right, they were, under Trump, and I think we may see differences between Biden and Trump in ways that the global South, can't really tell one from another. But during 2020, countless numbers of people were deported, and many of them testing positive for COVID, right? So whereas Trump, while denying COVID here in the States, has used it as a way to prevent, right, certain immigrants, many of them being Haitian, from coming in, it's actually the U.S. deported, right, or exported COVID to Haiti via many of these flights where there were COVID positive folks being returned, many of them who, never ever lived in Haiti, right, and have never stepped foot there. And those are some other dynamics that I wanted to point to that. And as far as what's going to happen, there's so many moving parts. I think folks thought that there was a moment the U.S. was going to recognize a parallel government, and support the people's call for the removal of Moïse, but he's still there and he's still in power. And I think one of the things that I'm not sure if Jeremy covered, but Haiti is useful for the United States. It's strategic in terms of its fight against Venezuela, right? And so keeping this government in power, and actually having put this government, this party in power since 2010 in response to René Préval's attempt to get closer to Venezuela via Petrocaribe, right? The U.S. has fought back against the Bolivarian Revolution, right? And any potential progressive government from coming into power in Haiti, in order, right, to do what it's done over the last couple of years, particularly intensified under the current president, which is to, not recognize Nicolas Maduro's election, right, and by voting down his recognition in the OAS, right. So there's a series of ways that Haiti's been useful, particularly since 2004. To strike back against any efforts in the region, right, of folks promoting alternatives, right, and let alone calling for full-on socialism. I know it's distracting.
So cute, it's distracting, but the people love it. Everyone here is saying adorable. That's the next generation.
Yes,
they love the camera, so that's a beautiful thing. But just let us. We understand 100%. Whenever you have to leave, you can stay on. There's some really important comments here about Petrocaribe, and we can't remember what Venezuela did, not just for Haiti, but here in the South Bronx and in Chicago and in Boston. That internationalism of the Bolivarian project, and now that Venezuela is at one of its toughest moments, with the blockade really ratcheted up in 2014 in the Obama years, because it's a bipartisan blockade. Mamira's point is so important. When you're in the class struggle and you're under this blockade in Iran or Zimbabwe, do you care whether it's a proto wannabe fascist like Trump, or whether it's Biden, or whether it's Obama? A blockade is a blockade. War is war. And I think, Mamira, what we're going to see in these Biden years are more soft coups. Imperialism is going to keep using the NGOs and the funding streams and devaluing other people's currency. And that's what they've done now for decades. It's not easy to be a revolutionary really anywhere in the world. You're never going to get paid a cent to be a revolutionary. If we were using our intellect and our talents and whatever degrees that we got from wherever, if we were using them in the service of imperialism, in the service of the ruling class, we'd be millionaires. We'd be well-paid journalists, professors, whatever. But because we have conviction, we have principles, we don't receive a dime for that. And for the Haitians down there, you can't be an anti-imperialist professor at the universities there. They'll never give you a position. If you're a journalist who dares to speak of the truth and go beyond the sensationalism, they call that down there, when you're a bende patria, when you're a sellout, they say on tisusu blanc. And a lot of people have been reste avec yo. Yeah, ou ka expliquer tout ça pour you.
I mean, the rest of it borrows from, a very sad reality of child, slavery, labor that's still a practice in Haiti. But generally is the idea that it's a child that's, a servant of the household. So it's a problematic metaphor, by the way, that our social movement folks use. But certainly the idea that, right, it's a master-servant relationship is what they're trying to convey with that metaphor of Restavek.
Yeah.
Just being, at the beck and call of the imperialists.
Yeah. And I think, depending on your time, we don't want to keep you hostage. We're following your lead. As long as you and the next generation can keep being a part of this, and everyone loves their presence. They're more than welcome.
Well, hold on. How long do you go for?
Well, there's still quite a few people tuned in. So if you could do another 15 minutes, I want to give them a little bit of Aristide. I want them to understand the legacy of Aristide. I think we have to talk about Jean-Bertrand Aristide. Jean-Bertrand Aristide, this is an oversimplification. I know Mamira is excited to hear what I'm about to say now, like fill in the blank, but Aristide was kind of a Bernie Sanders-esque and a Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez-esque maybe Salvador Allende in Chile. He was in the Dominican Republic. The historical example would be Juan Bosch, the elected president post Trujillo in 1963. Jean-Bertrand Aristide's slogan was "From misery to dignified poverty." I mean, that's not a radical slogan. But for Haiti, anytime you talk about self-determination and respect for the masses of people, it is radical, according to the Marco Rubios, according to the pompous Pompeos, and all of these other State Department lackeys who've done nothing but parachute down misery and more blockades on Haiti. So Aristide represented the L'Église, the People's Church, liberation theology. Aristide came out of liberation theology. And Lavalas, as Jose is saying, I keep telling Jose he got to be up here on the other side of the screen with us because he knows a lot about Haiti. He said, Mamira, he said, anyone in the inside of the Hotel Montana, we can't trust them no more. So he knows about Pétionville and everything. And there's an eager student here of the Haitian Revolution, of the Venezuelan Revolution, Jameer, un colombiano. Jameer keeps asking, what is the legacy and the impact of Hugo Chavez and the Bolivarian Revolution on the anti-imperialist left in Haiti? I remember when Chavez went to Haiti, so we can definitely speak on that, Jameer. I'm gonna share a slide or two, a few images of Aristide. I want to show some images too. If I share from my Twitter, they won't bump me off, right? I'm not big on the tech thing. Can I share from my Twitter some images from Haiti?
I just wanted to say, as you prepare to share, I mean, I think the Haitian left has some reckoning to do with, you know, how they've treated the Aristide issue. You know, I think that there was definitely a split on the left. I think, you know, us, you know, Black radicals in the United States often want to make sure to show how we, you know, stand differently than perhaps some, you know, white liberals, right, and how they understand certain questions. And so we know that the left here is plural, right, and we accept that in ways that when we look at Venezuela or Haiti, we sort of reduce the sides, you know, to only certain figures, you know, messianic figures, right? And so I think the issue of Aristide is complicated, right? And there's certainly some critiques that have been leveraged against him that I think should be taken seriously, and many of the critiques that have been leveraged, you know, against Chavez and, you know, from feminists or from environmentalists about not moving out of the extractivist model, right? And so I think that there are ways that, you know, we on the left should keep our leaders accountable for really moving us out of, you know, the way that Western civilization has understood the human and the planet, right? And our rights over it and how we should live with it. You know, there's those very serious questions that we need to continue to unpack. And so I think that what Aristide has done in Haiti is, you know, immeasurable in terms of, you know, the slogan that he had, Tout moun c'est moun, all people are people, which seems pretty obvious, but which needed to still be said, right? In 1980s Haiti, 1990s, you know? And so there is certainly, and we can't take away from what the power of discourse, you know, and words in terms of changing people's outlook and consciousness. But I also think that the critique that the left had in 1994 of Aristide, you know, is on point in terms of the disappointment to see, right, U.S. troops on our first Black Republic soil, you know, accompanied by who had been seen as, you know, the epitome of Dessalines' dream, you know. And so I think that those are things we should, you know, be honest about, and at certain points that there are critiques that feminists have leveraged against Aristide in terms of what happened in 2004, when there were armed groups that were supportive of Aristide who, you know, utilized some of the similar tactics that were critiquing the gangs that are protecting the right-wing government now, right? Which is rape of women, right? So I think that those are things, and I can't put that on Aristide's back, right? That like certain gangs, you know, reacted in these ways and attempted to, you know, demonstrate their support by whatever action that they felt that they needed to take. So, you know, I think that those are serious things that we need to think through, but I think it would be unfair to not also recognize the power that Aristide still holds today, or rather his movement. Many of the people who come out on the ground come out because they are the same folks who are, right, the descendants of these Tileglis, you know, committees that were very much vital in the resistance against dictatorship in Haiti, you know, the dictatorship, the Duvalier family, and they continue to be the folks who will show up, you know, on the ground whenever a call is made to protest, right? Because their material conditions, unfortunately, have not really ameliorated, have not become better, right? So I just want to say, you know, that there are some nuances, and it depends on, you know, which crowd we are in front of, you know, of course, to bring them up. That I think that, you know, the topic of Aristide like raises for folks to, you know, who live in Haiti in ways that may not be nuanced on the international level, or doesn't matter to be nuanced on the national level, because, like, you know, that's our indoor business, you know, like we're going to contend with our own selves on the left that, you know, y'all on the international don't need to be in, right? That's our business. But, you know, I think those are the things that I think the left in Haiti is still grappling with, this positioning around Aristide. And then, you know, a lot of them really, I guess, regretful of having joined the Groupe des 184 in 2004 against Aristide. You know, there is a contingent of the left that did take to the streets because they were, you know, there were student university protests happening in 2003 where the students felt that, you know, like, as all of us, even on the left, think that, you know, we should retain the right to protest even so-called left-leaning governments, you know, when they're in power. And, you know, the students, you know, were protesting, you know, as is their right. And there was a movement, you know, of, you know, the bourgeoisie that usurped that movement and turned it into, you know, he must leave. And we see that within a couple of months, Aristide was ousted, you know, clearly the candidate of the people. Whereas, you know, Jovenel Moise, he's been protest since the minute he got in power. Like, his actual election was contested from the beginning, and yet he's still there, right? So we can see how the international treats, right, an Aristide versus a Jovenel, which shows, you know, that even if we have some critiques about Aristide's imperfection, he's human, right? That he still presented a kind of agenda that was extremely threatening to the imperialist and to the capitalist, right? And that remains true today, right? In ways that, yeah, go ahead.
You're 100% correct. Every social movement, every movement that comes behind a revolutionary leader is going to have its contradictions. We don't deny that. We don't deny that the Bolivarian leadership, the PSUV, a party of 7 million people, of course, there's going to be a right wing, a left wing. There's going to be ideological disagreements. And I was there in Port-au-Prince in 2004 when Aristide won for the second time, before the second U.S. coup, really weeks later. And definitely, Lenin explained, Vladimir Lenin said that, you know, the revolution attracts the best of us and the worst of us. Whenever you take state power in an exploited country like Haiti, some people are going to be hangers-on. They're going to gravitate towards power, not because they care about la balas and the revolution and the social movement and Tileglis and TTT. They're going to gravitate towards opportunism and power. So we have no illusions. At the same time, objectively, just by saying tout moun c'est moun, just by saying that we want to go from misery to dignified poverty, it's such a small demand from arguably the most important historical country in the Western Hemisphere and in the world, right? The symbolic country of Haiti. And even that was too much for the Clinton administration and for the Bush administration before him and after him. So it's been unfettered aggression militarily, economically against Haiti, proving that this system cannot sustain any sense of justice or equality as we know. So we want to be respectful. I'll follow your lead if you want to do 5 more minutes. If you want to, it's up to you.
I can do another couple minutes because I'm beyond bedtime. But you know, the reason I say this is it's not to critique Aristide or Chavez, right? It's just to say, you know, to those of us who dream of revolution, right? To maybe for us to become clearer about what we mean, right? And what that looks like, right? That it's sort of, you know, softer capitalism, right? That it's not still embedded within the same logic of growth and development extractivism. That's part of what I guess I'm trying to raise for us to think about, you know, because we're always out there putting fires and not spending enough time, you know, really thinking through what this alternative should really look like. And of course, you know, I recognize that capitalism has had centuries to perfect itself and adapt itself. And, you know, those of us on the left keep experiencing counter-revolution. So every time we try something, we don't even have time to make the mistakes and, you know, come up with a new version. I'm just hoping, you know, by this soft critique of our left-leaning, you know, icons that, you know, the next wave of us who eventually take power, because I think that's the business in which we're in, right? We're not just having these talks to have the talks, is that we're trying to build power, right? That we might look at these lessons learned and do something else. You know, that's what I'm trying to say in this moment.
No, 100%, 100%. And those comradely critiques, those constructive critiques, every time I've been in Haiti and Venezuela, we always have those conversations. And there might be a few prestige, a few Haitian beers involved, but it's important to have those real conversations. We don't want to glorify or idealize.
If we don't have a program, you know, like the opposition right now, they don't have a program, right? So they take over power. And they're going to be sitting at the same table that Jovenel was sitting with the IMF, the World Bank, the U.S. Embassy, right? Because they haven't thought out their program. They say, you know, we're going to fight back insecurity. What does that actually mean, right? Are you going to disarm the gangs? Are you going to execute all of them? Are you going to put them in prison, right? Some of us are prison abolitionists. Like, how does that reconcile with some of those, you know, visions, right? What do we think justice looks like? Is it going to be a reconciliation process, right? I don't think that even this opposition that's vying for power, many of them, you know, themselves already named in a series of, you know, drug trafficking and money laundering scandals, are going to necessarily bring forth, right, solutions, right? I think that's sort of the fear, right? That if they take over without there being a real people's agenda, that it's going to be more of the same for Haiti, right? Just a different face in power, you know, a different cabinet, and maybe they have a left-leaning discourse, but they're going to do the same.
Yeah, and how do you organize the new worlds when you're under so much pressure? When they're always throwing fire down on you, hurling hell down upon you. How do we create these conditions? How do we create this new socialist system, revolutionary system? How do we combat machismo and sexism and all of the contradictions that we carry, not just in the working class of Haiti, but right here in the belly of the beast? So these are the big questions. No process is perfect, certainly. Jose is giving a shout out to Bois Caiman in the Haitian Revolution and the origins. And I think it's important when we talk about Bois Caiman and we got to talk about voodoo, because everything in the West about voodoo is so negative. But then you go to Haiti, and I was in voodoo ceremonies. And ukatande tambu yo, and you can hear them Haitian drums, yogi on T clarin, and they got that Haitian moonshine in the mountains, and there's often no electricity, and the sun goes down, and that's the end of light for the day, and you just hear the drums and you follow the drums. So for me, being from a different world, when I was in the mountains of Haiti, because Haiti traditionally is a very, very peasant society, it's a rural society. It's been neocolonialism, neoliberalism, globalization that has forced so many peasants to go into the ghettos of Port-au-Prince and Au Cap-Haïtien. And, that's not the essence of the Haitian historical experience. But when you can't make a living and U.S. aid is dumping their surpluses and killing off your native pig population, it was another symbolic thing. There's an incredible documentary called The Pig's Tale about, it's a Rasta, it's a Haitian American Rasta who went back to, he grew up in Brooklyn, he went back to Haiti in the 1980s to look at what U.S. aid and the U.S. government had done to the native, they call it the Creole pigs, cochon Creole. And then what in true U.S. aid State Department fashion, I mean, you can't make this stuff up. What did they do? Then they brought in the white pigs. So they got rid of the Creole pigs, which were like more mixed, smaller pigs.
Creole pigs meaning coded for black pigs, and then get rid of them and bring in some white pigs, right?
Yo, they were white pigs that weighed like twice as much or 3 times as much as the Creole pig. Like you can't. The symbolism.
I mean, they're GMO pigs, right? I mean, I was having this conversation with somebody, in Ish in the middle of Haiti, and talking about, well, the white pig, produced 12 babies instead of like the Creole pig was producing 6, right? And so he was talking about just the quickness at which this pig could reproduce itself, right? And so these are definitely genetically modified like organisms, right, that were being pushed onto Haitians, which has like all kinds of health repercussions, and certainly, did not end up bringing about this prosperity that they were supposed to bring, right, by replacing the Creole pigs, and also, coming to, affect the way that people usually do things, right, obviously, and changing their mode of production. But I am gonna have to jump off, so I'm gonna let you continue to do.
We'll let you go. So many people are giving you shout outs. They want you to run for revolutionary office in Haiti. So you know what I'm saying? You're gonna have votes from the diaspora. Thomas is saying, as a Native American, we show solidarity to other shaman cultures of Haiti. It's impressive they kept their spirituality alive since slavery. Jose's got all the comments on the
question. Let me bring Jose on because he's
Jose.
I was the one talking about voodoo. There's not a protest that begins without a voodoo ceremony, right? So it's very much present still in, protest culture. And, I think that has gained a lot of, yes. I'm being told that it's time. Okay, I thought.
Yeah, that was a mass protest right there in your home.
Yes. So okay, it's a mutiny, so I gotta go. But I will say that it continues to have very much, the revolutionary potential that it did 200 some years ago. Though there are ways that it has become extremely commercialized as well, right? Turned into a commodity, as many other things are in the system that we live. But I think it doesn't take away from the force that it has, and a lot of folks are calling for the voodoo sector to pronounce itself on the current moment, right? Because you've had the Catholic Church, the Protestant churches have come out and have said some things, and there are efforts within the voodoo community to federate into a variety of entities, and some of them more political than others, and some of them more cultural than others. And so, there's still the community that hasn't yet fully positioned themselves. And one of the things that has come out is how the different gangs, many of them tend to be folks who are themselves voodoo priests, right? So they are channeling the spirit of revolution and rebellion, unfortunately, to do actions that are not revolutionary, right? And so there is that aspect of how voodoo has been co-opted in that sense, not towards revolutionary gain. There are a couple articles, I think, coming out mostly in French and Creole, talking about the uses of voodoo by the gangs at this time, right? To say things like, Ogun is protecting me and I won't get shot by bullets, right? And sort of using the mystical to enlist many people into their armies, if you will, right? So there are other ways that the religion, for being a non-hierarchical, non-centralized form of practice, can also be co-opted by those that we don't want to use it as an arm. So that's something that's been interesting in terms of the ways that voodoo has been used in the space, and it's also part of the mainstreamingness of it, that it's very and I will give a shout out to Aristide for that. That's because he put it on the map as an official religion of the country, and started talking about giving specific recognition rights to voodooism. And so it's very much something that's embraced in Haiti in ways that even when I was growing up in the 90s was still, the thing that people were doing in secret. And now it's a, very mainstream phenomenon in Haiti and the diaspora. So I'll just make that one last comment. And then thank you for having me on and being patient with everything I got going on.
All right, thanks so much. I'm not going to say nothing else because I'm going to entice you to stay more. So I'm going to be quiet so you can go rest. Thanks so much, Mira. Get some rest. Kembela, not Pali.
Okay, merci.
Okay, bye-bye. Good night. Bonsoir. So thank you to everybody. These comments are great here. Lumpia Logic doing what I should be doing. Hit subscribe, hit link. I'm supposed to say that, right? I'm in Haiti right now. Ma parle avec tout révolutionnaire ça yo. I'm just thinking, I'm so focused on Haiti. I can't worry about the share and like and all that. So shout out to Larry, Chavista, Emily, Andres, Izquierdista, Ricky, Apps, Loggy, Fortaline, Yes, it's LX. Thanks to the collective and Danny keeping us connected with people in other parts of the world. Yeah, that's what we have to keep doing. And of course, the internet is a huge issue. It's part of imperialism. And they control the satellites. And that's why they're so afraid of China. If China has 5G control, then China can help out of Venezuela. They can help out of Cuba or Zimbabwe or Vietnam, the blockaded states. So that's why they want to control all this technology. And then they can, whenever we try to have guests on from Venezuela or in Cuba and Haiti, we have these infrastructural problems. It's a very real thing. I do want to share a few images before I sign off. I want to show you some images from this history of Haiti. Give me a second to figure out how to do that. Here we go. So some images here of Jean-Bertrand Aristide. This was the figure that the United States did everything to overthrow. Jean-Bertrand Aristide, like I said, he came out of the liberation theology movement, which was first very popular in Brazil and in Chile. And it was one of the first democratic elections, people's elections in Haiti in 1991, since the time of Dessalines and Christophe and the original revolutionaries who made the Haitian Revolution. And Titid was his nickname, like Little Aristide. And he came from the Tile-Église, the poor people's church, the popular church. Because you got to understand, we can talk about voodoo all day, and that's the true essence of Haiti's spirituality. But Haiti is a very Catholic, Christian country because of colonialism. So you'll hear a lot of Haitians critique the heck out of voodoo. So the United States doesn't invade just once; they invade Haiti twice to overthrow Aristide. So that gives you a sense of how objectively on the side of the poor, on the side of the masses. Aristide was. Some people asked, where is Aristide today? Aristide was allowed back into Haiti a few years ago. It was a type of agreement, a de facto agreement. Aristide was allowed back as long as he did not enter into the realm of politics. When he was overthrown in 2004, the U.S. Embassy with U.S. Marines forced him onto a U.S. chartered plane, and they dropped him off in the middle of the Central African Republic. He made his way to South Africa, and he lived in exile for a number of years. And the Haitian ruling class, with their imperialist backers, only allowed Aristide back into Haiti when he agreed to stay out of politics. But then Madame Lee, his wife, was a senator for a while as well. But as Mamiro was saying, the Lavalas movement hasn't been, Lavalas means a flood of hope, a flood of water. That's what this mass movement was called, that came together behind Jean-Bertrand Aristide. And Aristide he had I wouldn't call it a socialist program. It wasn't that revolutionary, but it was akin to what some of the great social democrats or lighter socialists, Lula in Brazil, Dilma Rousseff in Brazil, and even that program frightened the Pompeos and the Marco Rubios, who I mentioned, so much that they intervened and they invaded and they overthrew Aristide. Now, going back to this voodooism, going back to the voodoo theme, people thought that Aristide had 20 lives because they burned down, the Tonton Macoutes burned down Aristide's congregation in Port-au-Prince, and he always escaped death somehow, some way. So there's no question that Aristide, he came to the United Nations. He spoke truth to power. He's a polyglot. He would denounce imperialism in the imperialist language in English. He speaks Spanish fluently, Haitian Creole, French, German. He speaks something like 8 or 9 languages. The Haitian people, they're raised as polyglots. Most Haitians have the Creole and the French, and then either English or Spanish or another language in their arsenal. Have y'all ever heard this joke before? Couldn't resist this internationalist joke, and then I'll get to more of Jose and Black Patriot in the other comments. But what do you call someone who speaks 2 languages? Bilingual. What do you call someone who speaks 3 languages? Trilingual. What do you call someone who speaks 4 languages or more? A polyglot. What do you call someone who speaks 1 language? An American. So, and I don't say that to offend any of our people. That just speaks to the reality that here in the US, we're not taught internationalism. We're not taught any sense of solidarity. The sensationalist treatment of Haiti that Mamiro was speaking to, so many Americans can't conceive of solidarity. All they've ever known, because of the influence of the church, which church? Many churches. I'm not going to start naming them all, but all they learn is charity. And Haiti doesn't need charity. Haiti needs solidarity. You know, to go back to that Malcolm quote, we don't need your crumbs. We need a bakery in which to make our own bread. So the essence of the Haitian struggle is self-determination. All Haiti needs is to be left alone to sort out their own destiny. All Iran needs, that's our number 1 task, is anti-imperialists in las entrañas de la bestia. Here in the belly of the beast, that's what we have to demand. Hands off of Haiti, hands off of Syria, hands off of Libya. I mean, look what the US did to Libya, one of the great crimes of the 21st century. And where was the left? Who came into the streets for Libya? Who's come into the streets for Syria? Because when the ruling class beats those war drums, it's difficult to see through their propaganda. So yes, Mihir Joshi, anti-imperial solidarity. Thomas, Aristide seemed like an establishment-leaning leftist, yet the US had issues with him. So this is more of a question. U.S. foreign interventionist policies are always right-wing extremists or neoliberal. U.S. fears the other. Yeah, I wouldn't quite call Aristide establishment. He wasn't a career politician. He came from that liberation theology background. I'd give him more credit, but I think your characterization is more or less correct. I mean, if Haiti was, even after centuries of exploitation and blockades and invasions and occupations, if Haiti was left alone in 1991 with Aristide, if Haiti was left alone in 2004, Haiti would be chilling right now. So we have to keep going back to that history. Metro place, it's harder to manipulate corrupt left-leaning presidents. Oh, exactly. I mean, being on the ground in Haiti, being a student of the Haitian left, the Haitian revolutionaries, and shout out to IT Progrès, Haiti Progress, an incredible trilingual online publication that you can read for latest developments. Shout out to IT Liberté, Haiti Liberty, another good online newspaper that you can read, trilingual, to get training from these different organizations and to learn the language. For me, it was super spiritual to actually see the voodoo and be a part of it. Not like all these Hollywood movies about zombies and sensation. That's just pure racism. Thanks, Kagwal, Facts, Jenny Lynn. U.S. won't tolerate anyone even mildly left-leaning. Yeah, exactly. Like, really, Rafael Correa was trying to like have a conversation with U.S. foreign policy, and they refused. You know, and it's interesting right now. We had the whole conversation last night about Ecuador and the Correísmo, right? And Mamira's critiques of extractivism, those things are important, but there were a few comments here that I can paraphrase, like when you're trying to maneuver and survive, and the IMF and the World Bank are trying to shut you off from loans, in the New York Times and the private media in Ecuador, and they're vilifying you left and right, you need investment. I mean, and that's what the National Assembly and Nicolas Maduro in the executive office passed in Venezuela last month. They passed the anti-blockade law. And what the anti-blockade law does is it gives more latitude to Bolivarian leadership that if there is Chinese investment, if there is Russian capital, if there is investment, and we need to roll with it to feed our people. I mean, right now in Venezuela, I don't think we know just how dire it is on the ground. There's no gasoline, because if you don't have capital, if you don't have resources, how can you have gasoline? How can you get the oil out of the ground? And that's what the U.S. blockade is. That's why the U.S. Coast Guard and the U.S. Navy are blockading Venezuela in the Caribbean Sea. That's why Trump sent another 800 U.S. special forces to the border with Colombia. So for me, and this debate is ongoing, but this is one of the classic debates on the left. And I've talked about this quite a bit on Telesur in both languages. Are we in a position with all of our internet here in the quote unquote West, in the imperialist center, in the metropolis, are we in a position to critique the revolutionaries on the front lines of struggle who are enduring and surviving an everyday blockade and don't have the small things that we take for granted? Things like food and things like internet connection and things like social media. So I think the Venezuelan leadership, and again, we're not saying that Aristide or Nicolas Maduro we're not idealistic. We're not saying that they're perfect. Show me any human being that's come out of capitalism that's perfect. We all carry the historical baggage. Unless you were born and raised in Pluto or Mercury, you carry that historical baggage because you're a product of the insidiousness. You're a product of decades and centuries of the insidiousness of capitalism, of imperialism, of white supremacy, of misogyny, of machismo, of heterosexism, of homophobia. What else have we ever known? So there's no way, to quote Malcolm again, a chicken cannot lay a goose egg. And if they could, that would be one golden goose. That would be one revolutionary goose, right? So this system can only produce the backwardness that it's designed to produce. So I appreciate the left critiques of Maduro. Well, I appreciate them in the sense that I'm respectful towards them to have a conversation. Okay, we can have a conversation, but who are we? We're not in the trenches like they are. So it comes across as very haughty, very Western, very know-it-all-y. I don't know if y'all too young to remember the ISO, the International Suburban Organization, but they were experts at always critiquing Cuba. I mean, who's endured more warfare than the Cuban people? Economic warfare, media warfare, diplomatic warfare, military warfare. There's still a U.S. military base in Guantanamo. So I'm not saying the Cuban process, we're not saying the Cuban process is perfect, but we're saying that in a comradely way, comrade to comrade, we can converse with the Cubans, and we're going to learn a hell of a lot more from them who've been in the trenches than they're going to learn from us. And that was always my spirit, my posture, being in Haiti, being in Cuba. And I went down there from a young age. I was frustrated with the American left, and I wanted to go down there and really learn Spanish, the way Cubans speak Spanish, the way Dominicans speak Spanish, the way Haitians parlent Creole. Faut que parler tant que yo même. So being a student of the Haitians and living with them, and staying with them, I mean, that's the only way to learn a language. You can do all the computer programs you want, but when you live it out there, and if the Haitians are throwing rocks, you throwing rocks. What voyez wash? Because that's the symbol of struggle in the Dominican Republic and in Haiti. And you can see the images now. There's actually some images I want to show from Haiti that I shared on my Twitter. I'm afraid to go on my Twitter. I don't know if they're gonna bump me off the StreamYard. We'll see what's allowed. Let me hit these comments up first. Red Sea Socialist, yes. Izquierdista, ultra left critiques from the ivory tower. The revolution has to survive in the real world. Yeah, like how is our priority dictating to the Ecuadorians whether they extract resources or not? Is extraction good? No, but we live in something called the real world. Lenin Moreno, who I can't even call Lenin because he's no Lenin, and he's no Moreno, es un traicionero, es un hijo de la puchica. In other words, I can't say. Lenin Moreno just signed another $3.5 billion deal in the 11th hour of Trump's reign, a $6.5 billion IMF deal at the end of last year. So when Andrés Arauz, who's an economist, he was an economist finishing up his PhD and everything, when he was called upon by the Citizens Revolution to do a little something called running for president of Ecuador. And it looks like, you know, they'll be victorious in April, but it's not going to be easy with that private media and imperialist backing and the NGOs. But if they have to extract resources to feed their people, to survive this twin pandemic of COVID-19 and the austerity measures that Lenin Moreno oversaw, I mean, how is our priority to publish an article on a critique of extractivism? I can't wrap my mind around it. It's people trying to have that third camp position. It's bizarre. It's some real white people shit, some real petty bourgeois type stuff. And I think we need to critique that, because those ISOers, the ISO dissolved, but those ISOers have tried to resurface. I'm not going to tell you where they've tried to resurface. That's a conversation for another night. And if y'all want me to talk about it, I'll talk about it. So R. Marbitini 8, I don't see why any illegitimate deal with the IMF by any illegitimate foreign coup government would be honored. Yeah, 100%. But then they'll use that as a justification for financial blockades. They're gonna try to make life miserable. If the left wins in Ecuador, then they're gonna come with all their tricks. So we got President Jesus' attention. The ISO never went anywhere. They just rebranded. Oh, President Jesus, I feel you, bro. I feel you. I hope Ecuador doesn't pay the IMF loan backs. F them. No, 100%. And that's what Andrés Arauz has said. He said there's a better way forward, 100%. I mean, yeah, they're going to try to make you, you know, there's that classic quote that the McDowell Douglas, the missile companies and the military jets paved the way for McDonald's. So it's the U.S. military that works in tandem with U.S. capital to try to continue to recolonize all of these countries, the Bolivarian countries that have tried to break free. And that's why they met out so much punishment on the Venezuelan people. It's unforgivable what the Venezuelan leadership has done, how they've stood up to imperialism. And it's unforgivable when anybody on the left who calls themselves a leftist does not support this besieged leadership. So that's an important conversation to keep coming back to. Yeah, then you have the ultra leftists, which is a little bit different than the ISO, but the ultra leftists who think that, they think every revolution is going to be perfect. What did Mao Zedong say? The revolution is not a tea party. It's not embroidery. It's not sitting down for a little chat. The revolution is real, and the revolution has 1 million contradictions. So I think when we study Aristide and the Aristide experience, which was short-lived experiences, because imperialism wouldn't let you breathe, wouldn't let the Haitian people have that authentic liberatory experience. Haiti's still being punished for the legacy of 1804. So Lang Aprine says, ultra lefties, the purity testers, yes, speak on it, are just dividing and conquering the left, sadly. I think they're an exhausted, dying faction. I don't think they're conquering anything. I think they have their little circles where they preach to one another, but they're not. Let's debate them anywhere, anytime, and expose them for that petty bourgeois, suburban, ISO suburbanism that they are. Yes, Venezuela is little Haiti. Yeah, Venezuela is the 2021 Haiti, and Haiti's that 1804 Venezuela. Rebellions who want self-determination, speak on it. So much history between Haiti and South American freedom. Yeah, we were talking with Nick and Ramiro and Carlos and Kayla and Ophelia. We should do something on Simón Bolívar to really explore the legacy of Simón Bolívar. Because yes, there's contradictions. Again, there's contradictions, but it's not just about where you're from. It's about where you're at. And where did Simón Bolívar end up? He ended up dying at the side of the people, very young. He died the same age as Malcolm and Martin Luther King. So more comments here. Jeremy Lynn, spoiled empire babies. Oof, y'all on fire tonight. Sure have a lot to say about situations they can't even conceive of. Only unrealistic perfection will do. Thank you. I'm gonna steal that line for one of my next articles. Lang Focus did an interesting video on Mexican Spanish and Spanish generally recently. Ultra left critics from the ivory tower. Yeah, 100%. The British imperialists are shameless. Yeah, all imperialists are shameless. Oh, we got something special for y'all coming up too. We got a bunch of comrades in Belfast, and we really want to give a platform to the comrades who come out of the Irish liberation struggle, the struggle to unite the Irish Republic. Right now, the 6 republics in the north divided from the 26 republics in the south. So there's an ongoing, unfinished Irish socialist revolution, which I'm definitely a student of. That's what my mother raised me on. So we definitely going to do stuff on that. I know I'm less than 100%, but I expect people to take me with a grain of salt. 100%. All comments here, as long as they're anti-imperialists, are welcome, and we'll debate with anybody. The system can only produce the backwardness it was intended to produce. Thank you, Mihir Joshi. I'm still disgusted by how the Brits just stole Venezuela's bank assets. All the gold of Venezuela, the Bank of England just said, no, we can seize that now. Pure arrogance. How has colonialism changed? How has colonialism changed? And how do we have these conversations with everyday people if you even mention Venezuela? All people have heard is that Nicolas Maduro is the biggest drug trafficker and there's a $15 million bounty on his head. And I mean, where are the drugs coming from? The drugs come from Honduras and Colombia, which are 2 of the the primary U.S. battleships in Latin America. The United States has 9 U.S. military bases in Colombia. The United States military has 11 bases in Panama. They have 14% of Puerto Rico. 14% of Puerto Rican land is controlled by the U.S. military. So Venezuela's very survival is a miracle. And the Brits steal all that money, right? Not the English people, not the English working class. Shout out to all the fighters in England, in the divided kingdom. There's no united kingdom. Get out of here. You know that Wales has its struggle, and Scotland, the Celtic Tigers, to maintain their self-determination culturally, economically, politically, historically, through the educational system. James Donaldson, I don't know about Obeah, but if Africa derived, you will see similarities. So going back to the question of voodoo and its role in Haiti. And for me, I mean, in all the countries I've been to, in all my experiences with the left around the world, in Cape Verde, in Western Africa, in South Africa, in Zimbabwe, some of the most special moments for me were being in Haiti, in the mountains. There wasn't electricity. Little children played the way little children should play. They would have like this old school radio, like the radios that we maybe we saw in the 1970s. I don't know. I wasn't really born in the 70s, but them old school radios that like our grandfathers might have listened to a baseball game on. And I would see little 8-year-olds in the middle of the mountains of Haiti, and they'd be fixing these old school radios and these old school televisions. And they were playing with Matchbox cars, and they were building stuff in nature. And I was just like, this is so beautiful. You don't see that. 2021. I mean, my 13-year-old's right there. Bro, he been on his game. I gotta take a few nights off after this because my 13-year-old taking advantage. So things I learned in Haiti, you know, they left a mark on me forever. And I get emotional. You know what I mean? Me da piel de gallina. It gives me goosebumps to remember those simple things. And a lot of the Haitian comrades here in Brooklyn, not many Haitians in the Bronx. The Bronx is straight Dominican, Puerto Rican, African American. But over in Brooklyn, a lot of the Haitians say, you know, I'm so sick of the police brutality. Every time I walk down the street, the humiliation, the brutalization, the police glare, and I can go back to Haiti. You know, despite the fact that Haiti is in the middle of a rebellion right now, it's still this historic homeland, and Haitians know they can go back and be at home. And I mean, do they have to worry about the police killing them? Well, if they go into the streets to defy this dictatorship, this U.S.-sponsored, NGO-sponsored dictatorship, they do have to worry about it. But the point they were making is that back in Haiti, they can just be without worrying about the NYPD. So I'm going to share another slide here. Going back to the PowerPoints that PowerPoint that I had shared with Jean Bertrand Aristide. There's a few other historical points I want to make. The hypocrisy, the absolute hypocrisy of the United States when it comes to immigration. When it comes to Haitians, when it comes to Dominicans, when it comes to Mexicans, right now at the height of this pandemic and at the height of the rebellion in Haiti, the U.S. deported today, Biden and this rogue ICE, they deported dozens and dozens of Haitian families and children today. And this has been going on for decades. In the 1990s, they put so many Haitians in Guantanamo Bay. So there was a famous meme, before memes were memes, there was a famous caricature or cartoon of the Statue of Liberty. In the Statue of Liberty, if you're Venezuelan or Cuban, and they can make Venezuela, Cuban, and these different daring socialist experiments, right? These dictatorships of the proletariat that insist on surviving, that insist on projecting regional integration, on rejecting imperialism and selling out. They want to crush these examples. So part of the battle of ideas, that's what Fidel Castro always talked about. When I saw Fidel speak in Harlem and in Havana and across Cuba, Fidel always talked about the battle of ideas. So that's why the CNN cameras, if Dominicans drown coming in una jola through the Caribbean Sea, CNN don't care, because DR is already a U.S. colony. But if something happens to Cuban migrants, if something happens to Venezuelans going to Trinidad, you best believe that's front page news, because that's a part of their battle of ideas. They want to starve your country. They want to blockade your country so you're forced to leave. We have the invasion of Haiti from 1915 to 1924. There was basically the restoration of a type of slavery to Haiti. This was the gunboat diplomacy of the Theodore Roosevelt years and Woodrow Wilson. And then you have the U.S. soldiers who invaded in the 90s and in the 2000s. So it's an ongoing, horrific legacy of these white supremacist invasions and occupations. But the Haitian people have always resisted and defied. And that mass uprising in 2016, 2020, which is ongoing today, we actually want to show you some images from the uprising. Important to see what's going on in Haiti right now. This is someone great to follow on Twitter, Madame Boukman. There's that legacy of the voodoo of the Haitian Revolution. Check out Madame Boukman on Twitter, Justice for Haiti, defender of Haiti, minister of truth, here to counter imperialist neocolonial narratives of Dessalines' land, nous belle, nous là, nous pas faisons pas. We're beautiful, we're here, we're not going anywhere. So her posts are 100% on point, but how can they talk about poverty in Haiti? Look at the Haitian ruling class. You know how much wealth just these 8 individuals own in Haiti? And notice the color of their skin, as if you hadn't already noticed 20 seconds ago. Haiti's not a poor country. Haiti is a fabulously, marvelously, historically rich country. And look at the people, the Mevs, the Brants, Tisusu, Blanc yo, Alufa yo, Grand Manger yo. Look at these people who run Haiti's destiny, who live up there in Kenskoff, Pétionville, in the richest neighborhoods of Haiti. Yo vraiment want yo. They should be ashamed. So Haiti is a rich country. We have to wrap our heads around that. So the U.S. Embassy statement, of course, the same rhetoric. The U.S. Embassy always saying that they're for justice and democracy. The two-faced U.S. State Department is trying to manage the neo-colonial monster it has created in Haiti so it doesn't get too out of control. It wants to review the illegal firing of 3 high court judges while promoting elections with a dictator whose term already ended this Sunday. This was one of the young warriors who succumbed to his injuries and passed away today. Rest in peace, Romario Santrilis. Too many young people dying. This is the future of Haiti. And these machanyo, these criminels, these criminals who are killing the young people of Haiti, that's who needs to be exposed. Here comes corny-ass nerd Price from the State Department spokesperson. What the hell does nerd Price know about Haiti? Citing Article 134.2 of the Constitution. Nerd Price don't know nothing about Haiti. The State Department don't know nothing about Haiti. So any opponent of the dictator, this is Port-au-Prince's mayor, Yuri Chevry. Now he's wanted for murder. That's what they'll do down there. They'll frame you. If you dare to stand up, then they're gonna frame you. So this is a Supreme Court judge. This is a megalomaniac. When we talk about Jovenel Moïse, we're talking about a megalomaniac. He thinks he can fire any judges who are against him. The entire Bar Association, the Lawyers Association has come out against. So it's not just the revolutionary classes, the petty bourgeoisie, the more conservative elements, even the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is broke with Jovenel Moïse. But I want to show you some of the images of struggle in Haiti. The people in the streets. And this is what's happening to journalists. I mean, I should have put a trigger warning here, but journalists shot dead in the street. Now you can appreciate why it's so difficult for us to get the guests on from Haiti. I mean, they're in the middle of an uprising, a war. So it's very difficult for them to get that, those things that we take for granted. So, yeah, this is one of the now, key people in the struggle. This judge who's been fired. Sorry, I'm moving so quick. I wanted to show you more images of the people in the streets and the different signs. U.S., UN, OAS, stop promoting kidnapping in Haiti, because the Haitian people understand where the funding streams come from. And all these threats against these different judges, who many of whom are at best just liberal judges. Here you go. Here's some of the images I wanted to show you. And there it is. I mean, that's very symbolic. And it looked like someone tried to save that drapeau blanc. Someone tried to save that American rag, and we saw what happened. So, cool. So, cool. Hopefully that was educational. I mean, I can go on all night. I'll start wrapping up. I'll get back to the comments here. I mean, I appreciate y'all in the anti-conquista community. It really feels like community with y'all. Y'all were here before 8 o'clock, and I was sweating like, man, we can't even get a connection with the Haitian comrades. But Mamira came through, Jeremy came through, Patrick, man, Patrick's amazing. Patrick has been an important international affairs analyst and journalist. So they can send, I mean, the revolution in Haiti is on WhatsApp. Everything's on WhatsApp. So they can definitely send solidarity greetings, and then we can translate and post them. The way that Sons of Fidel, and I came onto the YouTube because they kicked me off Facebook. They censored me, they banned me on Facebook. So that's how I came over to YouTube. But I think it's been a good thing to come to YouTube and build with you all. Orlando, Fashar, what's your thoughts on the slogan ACAB? Orlando, break that down for me off the top. ACAB. I don't know enough. Give me a little context clue so I can respond. Black Patriot, has anyone ever thought? Gracias, José. José, estamos en contacto. Tíreme ahí, conversamos. Sabe dónde encontrarme. Has anyone ever thought that these white supremacists are using witchcraft and playing with spirituality in order to continue their psycho-spiritual warfare? Oh, no question. John Henrik Clarke, one of the great historians, said that people who don't know their spirituality are people doomed to failure, into colonization. So spiritual struggle is a key part of white supremacy and colonialism. When the colonizer came, like Desmond Tutu said, it came with a gun in one hand and a Bible in the other. And Pablo Neruda, the Chilean poet, has that famous quote where the colonizer showed up and he told the native people, shut your eyes. And when they opened up their eyes, they had the Bible in their hands and all the land was stolen. So no question that the colonizer has used the spiritual realm to colonize, spiritual realm. Yeah, the Clinton Foundation, horrible. Gilbert Biggio, Sephardic Haitian billionaire, the very richest in Haiti, owns industrial and trading companies. I mean, if y'all could see how the Haitian bourgeoisie lives. Limousines here, SUVs here, 5 drivers. You can't just have 1 driver. You need 5. You need 10 servants. The rest of Vex, the child servants that Mamira was talking about. The amount of wealth in Haiti and this whole Western narrative about the earthquake. Yeah, the earthquake was earthquake was a natural tragedy, but it was the colonial earthquake that made Haiti vulnerable. It was a 500 years, centuries and centuries of a colonial earthquake that made Haiti vulnerable to that natural disaster. So tiny white minority controls most of the wealth in Haiti, just like in Guatemala, Mexico, and Colombia. Yeah, Thomas, just like here in the United States. And that's not to say that there's not also Haitian, black billionaires, but we did want to expose some of those ruling class families. And me being over there and seeing it, and when I used to be around, well, I wasn't around the Haitian bourgeoisie much, but the few opportunities that I did have to see with my own eyes, the contacts who brought me up around those fancy schmancy circles, just so I could sniff it out, tease it out, feel it out. They would always tell me, "Pa parle Creole, don't speak Creole. You have to speak English or French." In Haiti, don't speak the national language. Can you imagine the arrogance? So language is a huge thing in Haiti. Language is a huge thing. When I went to Haiti, I had no interest in learning French. Wow, why am I learn French? The national language is Haitian Creole. If I'm in Paris, if I'm in Marseille, I'm gonna learn French because that's the language of the people. But in Haiti, I ain't learning no French. We need to learn Creole. Say Creole New Year. That's the Haitian slogan. We are Creole. We speak Creole. Yeah, the Yankee lackeys with USA pay stubs. And you can imagine how enticing it is for a young Haitian youth who's talented, university educated journalist. You're trying to make it. And here come these NGOs. Your money's worth nothing. You can't even make a salary. Your family is struggling. And then here come these NGOs. So that's what they do. They buy off talent, just like they did to the black community in the United States. Just in 1969, they murdered Fred Hampton. They murdered Mark Clark. They murdered Bunchy Carter. They murdered John Huggins. They murdered Jonathan Jackson, George Jackson. 28 Panther leaders assassinated in 1979 with the right hand of the U.S. government, the FBI and COINTELPRO. And then what do they do with the liberal hand? They throw in all these crumbs, all these community programs, quote unquote, to try to do exactly what the Panthers were doing. So this Fred Hampton biopic film, we should chop it up. We'll have some of the anti-conquista crew come on and talk about this new Fred Hampton biopic movie. It's going to be very special. I mean, Chairman Fred was such a special individual. And you got to ask yourself, how could an 18-year-old, he was killed at 21, how could a 19-year-old, how could he articulate himself that way? How could he have this incredible proletarian internationalist vision? Well, that's what he was born and raised with. When you're born and raised in the struggle, you acquire those tools. Like Mamira's young one there, they're exposed to this from day one. And my children, I'll tell you about my children and how they were raised. So Andres is talking about how Native American religious artifacts are on display in foreign countries. They need to be given back to their rightful owners. Yeah, I mean, these British museums, these American museums have specialized in pillaging, in looting, in rioting for centuries. There was a great meme on Instagram. If you're against looting, you must be against American and British museums. That was a good one. Yeah, what industry are these 8 men involved in? Telecommunications, import, export, the central arteries of the Haitian economy. Agriculture, and of course the sweatshops. There's massive sweatshops in Haiti. Y'all should look at the history of Walt Disney World in Haiti, and Liz Claiborne and Kathy Lee Gifford and Fruit of the Loom. All these corporations. The UK houses, I can't even say the UK. England houses the world's largest stolen ancient artifacts. Yes, back to the artifacts. Thomas said it before I said it. Yes, bring back the religion. And that's why Haiti is so fundamental. Because the ancestors, Zanset, New York, they're there. And that's what voodoo is. And that's what musique racine is. I'll try to play some in the background, but I think I can play it on my phone or something just when I sign off in a few minutes, because the way this is all set up with telecommunications monopolies, they'll shut us down. I wanted to play some some special spiritual revolutionary musique racine from Haiti to bring in Jeremy and Mamira, but with all the copyright, we believe in copy left. We want to use and collectivize all people's resources, but they got to monopolize everything. Yes, bring voodoo back, and we can educate ourselves about voodoo and oppose the zombie apocalyptic dogma that they try to spit about voodoo when they know nothing about voodoo. Chrome was the local gulag for Haitians in Miami. William Jennings Bryan in Haiti. Yeah, all of these manifest destinaires. I'm just making up words at this point. I'm tired, but all of these big gunboat diplomats, quote unquote. There was nothing diplomatic about them. Everything that undergirded their ideologies was white supremacy. And that's why Haiti was so dangerous, because a self-determining Black republic, I mean, that's what inspired Simon Bolivar. That's what inspired Denmark Vesey. That's what inspired Nat Turner. Yeah, Orlando, there's a whole PowerPoint here. I'm just going light, you know what I mean? Because I feel the tiredness in my eyes, but y'all let me know. I mean, there's 35 slides or something like that in the PowerPoint. Another big conversation we need to have is Dominican and Haitian solidarity, and how the unofficial religion of the Dominican Republic is anti-Haitianismo. Anti-Haitian racism is part and parcel of the diet that Dominicans are fed every day in DR. And it's not that the Dominican people are bad people. That's not what we're saying. We're not saying that poor white people are bad people. Some of y'all might feel that way, and that's your thoughts, and that you're entitled to that. But I use the analogy of poor whites and Dominicans vis-a-vis the Haitian people because that's all Dominicans have ever known. They've never heard a positive word about Haiti. They've never heard a positive word about voodoo. Voodoo is a curse word. Voodoo means you're going to get kidnapped and someone's going to steal your cat. And I don't even want to repeat the vitriolic stereotypes that exist in the Dominican Republic. I mean, that's why I learned Creole, because I lived in DR and I saw the racism, and I'd go to get on a bus, and the Dominican cobrador and the Dominican chauffeur, the two dudes working the buses, they wouldn't let the Haitians on. I was like, how can this be? So living in DR was what, there's 1.5 million Haitians unofficially who live in the Dominican Republic. No different than the millions of Dominicans who live here in the US. You're forced out of your homeland by push factors and pull factors that you have no control of. But when they tell you that your money is worth 1/75 of the blanc money, of the white money, of the US money, what choice do you have? They've left you no option. So migration is never voluntary. No one wakes up and says, I want to be an immigrant. The Somalian poet who said, you only become an immigrant when you're born in the mouth of a shark. No one chooses to become an immigrant. So moonshine voodoo party. I see, yo, now y'all talking. Let me know when and where I'm there. 100%. Yeah, Metro Place, this idea of an ally. Am I an ally? Am I a comrade? For me, I follow that Fred Hampton, Black Panther Party, internationalist philosophy. Poor whites have a role to play as well. I come from nothing. I gave a whole talk on Sunday to the Marxist Library. Shout out to them in California and across this country. I gave a talk on a Black Panther Party formulation from 1967. The Panthers said, capitalism plus dope equals genocide. And me and my family, we come out of that reality. So for me, I don't see myself as an ally. You call me that all day. That's cool. No love lost for me with this system. I say, fuck this system. This system never did shit for me and my family. So I grew up on this. I grew up on the George Jackson, on the Malcolm, the Young Lords, the American Indian Movement, Leonard Peltier, Mumia Abu Jamal. Those were my teachers from a young age. And for me, We need poor white leaders too. Of course, we understand that in the vanguard, it has to be immigrant leaders, women leaders, LGBTQ leaders, trans leaders, Latino leaders, 100%, native, indigenous, 100%. But you're going to try to tell me, can you have a revolution in this country without white people? Without poor white people, without working class white people, can you have a revolution in this country? Can poor white people ever wake up? That's a deep question. But in a country of 333 million, when whatever percentage, 45%, 40%, 50% are whites, can you have a revolution without them? I mean, that's a deep, deep question right there. We're not going to answer it tonight, but it never resonated with me. An ally, nah, we on the front lines. This shit is shoulder to shoulder. Like the Panthers taught us, like the Rainbow Coalition taught us. And the Rainbow Coalition couldn't get off the ground because the FBI and Jehu Edgar and COINTELPRO, in a paramilitary way, in a militarized way, went out, search and destroy, liquidated. You know, the CIA will never say murder or assassinate. All the CIA and FBI documents say liquidate, neutralize. I lost you at the LGBTQ. Well, we ain't going there neither. That would be super divisive too. You trying to give me the bait, King Hercules. Can poor whites ever wake up? Yes, no question. If we don't have faith that poor whites can wake up, can we ever have a revolution in this country? Black Lives Matter had huge numbers of white youth on the front lines too. Yeah, 100%. It was deep too. At a lot of them Black Lives Matter protests, they would have the whites marching in the back, and that can get awkward too. Are we trying to segregate the struggle? And it's not just a racial segregation, but there's a class segregation because a lot of the quote unquote white allies were coming from more privileged white backgrounds, petty bourgeois backgrounds. So that shit gets deep. But what do you say to white dudes who are from the hood? What do you say to white people, white women who come from nothing, who have no faith in this system, who are on the front lines too? John Brown, did John Brown have white privilege? John Brown wasn't bulletproof, you know. So John, that's and let's end on let's end on this note because this is getting real interesting. If I keep reading Black Patriots comments, I ain't going to bed tonight. Okay, 100%. You ROZ can fall behind colonized leadership. Yeah, 100%. But John Brown, Malcolm X had that classic quote. Malcolm X said, "No faith in white liberals. If white people are really about the struggle, they're gonna go do as old John Brown did." So I encourage people, and thank you, Thomas. Yeah, American Indian movement built with tens of thousands of white socialists. Yeah, we should study the Young Patriots and White Lightning and these different revolutionary groups that came out of the white working class in Philadelphia and in Chicago. And I mean, look, the onus, the responsibility is not on colonized people and people of color to come over to poor whites. Hey, do you want to participate with us? The burden, the historical responsibility is on poor whites, on us to wake up, smell the coffee, and recognize centuries and centuries of white supremacy, settler rule, dispossession of the native people. So all power to the people. I'm going to sign off. I hope tonight has been educational. I'm learning a lot from you all. We're going to try to keep, yeah, I like that slogan, SH, 100%, that slogan from South Africa and Palestine, 100%. I'm going to go back and read all the comments, slowly. Thanks again to Jeremy, Mamira, Patrick, Jean-Paul. Even though the signal, wasn't steady in Port-au-Prince, we tried. So all power to the people. Like Fred Hampton said, what did Fred Hampton say? Black power to black people, brown power to brown people. He even went a little further, but I'm not going to say it. But basically, rainbow power to rainbow people, all power to all people. And as they say in Venezuela, faithful always to the struggle, never sell out. We shall overcome. Fieles siempre, traidores nunca, venceremos.